Hello everyone, I'm Jacob Kaufman, I'm Nerd in the Street, and this week Google I/O 2015 happened. Here's a quick recap of Google's keynote, which explained all the cool stuff they're going to do this year. So Google started out, as usual, by talking about some of the accomplishments they made in the past year. For instance, Android Wear now has over 7 models available. Apparently that's a lot, even though there are hundreds of Android phones available. So I watched the keynote, and I took notes sort of in the order that they talked. I'm not too keen on how they organized the entire presentation. I kind of understand why they did what they did, but basically they started by talking about Android, and then they talked about other stuff, and then they came back to Android later. Before all of that, they mentioned that HBO Now is now available on Google Play. So you remember last year Apple got HBO Now on iTunes, so Google is caught up now. You can watch your Game of Thrones on HBO Now on Google Play on your Android devices and your Chromecast and all of that. So Android M, the hot topic that everyone is talking about. Some new features that Google chose to highlight during their keynote. There are some changes to the way app permissions are handled. Right now, if you have an Android device, you might know that when you install an app, you get a big list of things that the app is requesting permission for, and you have to accept all of those in order to install the app. If you're using a third-party ROM, such as CyanogenMod or Paranoid Android, you might be able to go back and revoke some of those permissions later or spoof some of the information that apps ask for. But on stock Android and on the majority of stock ROMs, if you want to install an app, you have to agree to all of its permissions when you install the app. Now, Google grouped the permissions into larger, more general categories, which on the surface, that would be a bad thing for app permissions, because that would mean you would have to give an app more permissions than it actually needs to do its job. If the categories are more general, then, more functionality is going to be grouped into each permission category. However, you no longer need to accept every permission that an app asks for, and you no longer need to accept app permissions while you're installing the app. You can now install any app seamlessly, and then it will ask for each individual permission it needs as it wants to use them. For instance, Facebook Messenger, if you go in and try and install Facebook Messenger on your device, I don't have it on my device because it requests pretty much every permission there is. It requests location, camera access, all of the stuff that I don't need Facebook Messenger to have. So the way I see it, after I upgrade to Android M, I should be able to download and install Facebook Messenger without accepting any of those permissions. And then if I ever want to send one of my friends my location for some reason, then I can tap on the location share button, and at that point, Facebook Messenger would pop up an Android notification that says, Facebook Messenger would like to access your location, allow or block, or allow or deny or something like that. So yeah, that's a really great thing because, like I said, there are some really mainstream apps, Facebook Messenger being two of the big ones. But if you download like the AT&T Visual Voicemail app, asks for so many permissions that you shouldn't need to grant those permissions just to access your voicemail. So yeah, hopefully this will cut back on the giving apps all of the permissions, because that is obviously bad if you don't like things tracking you. Also, a side effect of this, because you no longer need to accept permissions at install time, right now if an app upgrade requires more permissions than the old version of the app had, let's say that an app developer adds functionality that requires a new permission. Right now, when Android auto upgrades your apps, it will not auto upgrade apps that have more permissions, because you need to go and manually upgrade them and accept the new permissions that they're asking for. Because you no longer need to manually accept permissions while you're installing apps, all apps will now be automatically upgraded on your device. I think that's a good thing, because it's kind of annoying how I'll have 10 apps with updates. Google Play will automatically go and update 7 of those apps, but then 3 of them I will have to go and upgrade myself and click that accept button. Next up, a lot of apps use web browsers within the app for UI elements, or just if you link to something. Right now, Twitter, I think that the Twitter app has a built-in web browser where if you click a link in Twitter, you won't actually go to an external browser, you'll just go to some mini browser that's built into the Twitter app. At least that's how it used to be, but if it's not that way and I'm just talking nonsense, the other alternative would be when you're in Twitter, you tap a link that somebody tweeted, and then you are switched to the Chrome app. You get completely kicked out of the Twitter app after clicking that link. Google recognizes that neither of those things are really optimal. You don't want to have to use crappy little mini browsers that developers are building into their apps. Then again, you don't want to get kicked out of the app you're in just because you want to view a link. So Google is now basically they're allowing app developers to use Chrome as an engine within their app. So they can go when they're programming their app, when a user clicks a link, open up a web browser, and they don't need to code their own web browser. When a user in that app clicks a link, let's say that I'm in Twitter and somebody tweeted a link and I click it, I am taken to maybe a custom themed version of Chrome. It's a tab of Chrome within the Twitter app, so it can have additional context options, like Twitter could add an option in the context menu of Chrome that says tweet this or retweet this link. At the same time, any auto-filled passwords or auto-completed forms from Chrome will be brought into that mini browser within the app that's actually Chrome. So yeah, developers can now embed Chrome into their apps, and they can put custom transition animations, color schemes, buttons, and overflow menu items into that Chrome tab. Next up was something called app links, and Google pointed out that links are a really important part of the web. Websites often link to each other because one website might want to send its users to do something that's not exactly in the scope of the website, so it'll link to another website. Well, now apps can link to each other in a similar way. For example, YouTube can link to Twitter if you want to tweet a video. So when you tap that tweet icon, rather than having a custom dialogue within YouTube and then YouTube has to code a Twitter API into their app, or rather than having an external Chrome browser open up with twitter.com, you can tap the tweet icon within YouTube and the Twitter app will open up. Now you might be thinking Android already does that, but right now when you click on a link within an app, you'll probably see a pop-up asking what you want to open the app with. Do you want to open this Twitter link with the Twitter app or with Chrome? That's called the intent system, and it asks the user what their intent was when they clicked on the link. Well, Google doesn't really like that intent system. They don't like that dialog box that comes up because it's an extra step that the user has to take. So now, apps can be verified by Android so they can claim links without having to ask the user if they want to open the link with the app. So here's how it works, using Twitter as an example. The Twitter app will have code in it that points to twitter.com, and then twitter.com will have code that points back to the Twitter app. So when the app is installed, when a user installs the app, Android follows the app's code to the website, which the website then verifies that the app is certified to open links. So now Android has pre-verified, yes, the Twitter app is allowed to open twitter.com links. In fact, twitter.com wants the Twitter app to take over Twitter links. So now users who have the Twitter app installed won't see a dialog when they click on a Twitter link. It'll just open up the Twitter app automatically. Another feature of Android M, mobile payments. Of course, Android Pay already exists, however, nobody uses it. Google made some changes and additions to Android Pay. For instance, other mobile payment apps can now use Android Pay as an engine. So like Walgreens is the example they used, I think. The Walgreens app can embed Android Pay into the Walgreens app. So customers don't have to open up Android Pay, they can just open up the Walgreens app while they're at Walgreens and pay using their smartphone. If they're one of the 5 or 10 people in the country who have credit cards that link to Android Pay, and if they're at one of the 2 stores in the country that accept Android Pay payments. Seriously, I just want to take a sidebar from what Google was saying. They had on the screen in the keynote all kinds of like Best Buy, Walgreens, like Walmart, maybe. They had all of these big name stores on the screen, and they said these are all the stores. McDonald's. You know, did you know that McDonald's accepts Android Pay payments? I didn't, and I doubt that they actually do at most locations. So yeah, all of this Android Pay stuff is great, but I have never seen anyone out in the wild using it. So I think that once that eventually spreads out of Silicon Valley and into places where people actually live, where users actually live, then that'll be kind of convenient, I guess. So yeah, in-app purchases can also use Android Pay now. Rather than subtracting money from your Google account, apps can now subtract money from Android Pay. So they're replacing Android Wallet with Android Pay. Awesome. And actually, there were no new features other than those. There were no new features in the Android Pay app, but they kind of just threw it in there to let us all know that they're still developing the technology and they're still developing the app. Here's something a lot more exciting, fingerprint support. It's now standardized. It's no longer OEM dependent. So right now, like the Samsung Galaxy S6 or whatever they're on, I think it's 6, has a fingerprint sensor on it. However, Samsung developed the fingerprint sensor, Samsung developed the software that runs the fingerprint sensor, and Samsung developed the user experience for using the fingerprint sensor. And if you want to use the fingerprint sensor on that phone, you have to be using Samsung's software because that's what runs the fingerprint sensor. Well, now Google is making fingerprint sensors a lot easier to implement. It's now built into the OS. It's now standardized. So built right into Android. Android Pay transactions can be authorized via fingerprint, just like the iPhone. Device unlocks and Play Store purchases can be authorized via fingerprint. And another thing about integrating it within the OS and not just having Samsung or LG or whoever do it for their individual phone is now Google has open authentication APIs. So app developers can use fingerprints for authentication within apps. For instance, you can log into your Twitter account using your fingerprint. Now it's important to note, the way I understand it, apps don't actually get your fingerprint data. Android gets your fingerprint data. You scan, Android verifies that your fingerprint is correct, and it tells the app authenticated. It doesn't give the app fingerprint data, it just tells the app that you passed the fingerprint scan. We have to watch things like that with all these biometrics coming up. Next up, power. Android has always had true multitasking, and what that is I can, what's an example? Basically, apps can be using resources at the same time. One app can be using the processor of the phone, and I can multitask and switch to another app, and both apps will be using the processor at the same time. Now that affects battery life. It's better than having non-multitasking devices because if we didn't have multitasking, then if you were, say, listening to music and then you switched to another app, the music would stop until you switched back to the music app. But we have multitasking, so you can do both at once. That's a really simple use case. There's much more complicated use cases than that. But yeah, multitasking affects battery life, keeping the processor running, keeping the, RAM and everything in use. Just using mainly the processor, yeah. So there's a new doze mode in Android, and it uses motion detection to determine if a device is being used. So if you're carrying a device around in your pocket, then you're going to want your device to buzz when you get a new text message, right? Maybe set off a notification sound when you get an email on your important email account, your work email account or whatever. However, not all devices are with us all day. For instance, my Nexus 7, my 2012 Nexus 7, I use it for reading, I use it for listening to podcasts, but I don't actually use it at any time of the day except at night before I go to bed. So that Nexus is up in my room, sitting on my nightstand all day long every day, and it's using a bunch of battery power while it's sitting there because it's still, checking for new emails and checking for notifications from the apps I have installed, even though I'm not even in the room. So this doze mode, what it does is, if your Android device is completely still and it's sitting on a table or something, if it's just completely not moving, then after a certain amount of not moving, it won't just stop getting notifications, but it will slow down its checking for notifications. For instance, let's say your device checks for new emails every 5 minutes normally. If you have it sitting on a table, it might only check for new emails once every hour or so. And that can save a whole lot of battery life. It's not using the processor as much, it's also not using Wi-Fi as much, or whatever network you're using. And the reason why we wanted to continue getting updates every hour or so, why we don't just stop it from getting, or why they don't just stop it from getting updates altogether, is because what I do with my Nexus is I turn it on airplane mode all day so that it doesn't check for new emails and new notifications all day. But then as soon as I get upstairs at night in the evening and I go into my room and I take that Nexus out of airplane mode to use it, the entire device slows down a whole bunch because all of the apps start checking for notifications at once. And it gets a whole bunch of notifications at once, and I have to sit there for 2 minutes swiping away notifications before I can actually start to use the thing. So yeah, this way, the device will still have most of the recent information when you pick it up. It just won't check for that information as often. And it'll save battery life. It's supposed to double standby time, and I believe that in a heartbeat, that it would double standby time. Another power-related feature, USB Type-C will now be a standard for charging devices. So USB Type-C is the next version of USB, and it enables faster charging for devices, and it's flippable, it's easy to use. So Apple made a big deal out of the old Apple 30-pin connector. You can only plug in one direction. If you flipped it over and it was upside down, it would not go into the slot. The new Apple iOS devices use that Lightning connector, and that Lightning connector will plug in whether you have the cord upside down or right side up. There's no upside down anymore. You can just turn it around and it works the same way. So USB Type-C is the open response to that, because, you know, we don't want to use proprietary Apple connectors for everything. USB Type-C is flippable. It's also bidirectional. So they went out of their way to mention this, and I'm not sure why, but Google said that devices with USB Type-C can both receive power through charging, or they can send power to charge other devices. And they even had a screenshot of an Android device with a dialog open that said, what do you want to do? Charge your device, connect to your computer, for file transfer, connect to your computer for image transfer, or charge another device. That was in the dialog box built into Android. So that's really interesting. Normally you wouldn't want to charge a device with your device, but it could be useful if we start seeing tablets with huge batteries or something, or tablets replacing desktops, and we want to charge your phone with your Android tablet. That would be, I guess, a use case for that. Now I do want to make a note. When I saw file transfer written as an option, I thought, I wonder if they're bringing back true file transfer capabilities to Android. You know, a few years ago when you got an Android device, you could connect it to your computer as a mass storage device, where the computer sees the file system on the Android device like a USB drive. That is not happening. I paused the video and I looked at the screenshot a bit closer, and for file transfer, the MTP Media Transfer Protocol is going to be used, and then the photo transfer, the PTP photo transfer protocol, is still going to be used. So that's not anything getting worse. It's just they're keeping the same protocols in use from the last version of Android. And MTP support is pretty good nowadays. A few years ago on Linux, it was kind of difficult to connect my Android phone to my Linux computers, but at this point, it's fine. A few quick other new features that they threw out while they were talking about all of that. There's now easier controls for copy and paste in the operating system. Contacts that you've recently exchanged information with and contacts that you frequently exchange information with are now going to be stored, so when you go to share something, they'll be at the top of the contact list for you. And volume controls are now simplified so that they're not complicated like they were in Lollipop. And basically what they did was they took the volume controls that they changed in Lollipop and they reverted it back to the way it was before Lollipop. So I was wondering if it was just me, if I was the only one who thought it was really strange the way that sound adjustment worked when I upgraded my LG G2 to Lollipop. Basically, you can turn down the sound all the way, but your device, it'll have 0% volume. It won't be on silent mode though. It won't make any noise, but it won't be on silent mode. If you want silent mode, there's a separate button for that in Lollipop. So they're getting rid of the whole profiles, the sound profiles feature that sounds like something you would get on a flip phone from 5 years ago. Yeah, they're scrapping that, taking that back out. Like I said, it's the way it was before Lollipop. Once again, when you turn down your sound to 0%, your device automatically goes into silent mode because 0% means it's silent. So good on you, Google, for recognizing that you made a mistake and fixing it. They also said a new feature was a drop-down menu to control individual audio streams. The screenshot that they had 3 audio streams. And I don't know what audio stream, if that's like a technical term or not. But the 3 audio streams were notification audio streams, media audio stream, and then there was alarm audio stream. Now those 3 audio streams, you can already adjust those individually in older versions of Android, in Android 4.0 and in Android 5.0. It's 5.0 Lollipop, right? Lollipop has that already, and older versions of Android already have that drop-down menu where you can control those 3 audio streams. Now, this might mean, since they said it's a new feature, the only thing that would be new about that is if, say you're playing music in one app, but then you're playing like a YouTube video at the same time for some reason, maybe you can control the volume for those 2 apps individually. And if they added that feature, that's really strange, but I could see how it would be useful in some remote instances. If they didn't add that feature, then they lied once again, and that's not new. So at this point, they took a break from talking about Android M, and they talked about Android Wear for a while. Like I said earlier, 7 devices available. 7 watches with Android Wear, which I suppose is still better than Apple has 3 versions available of their Apple Watch, and they're all pretty darn similar. Now, Google's promotion, their pep talk about Android Wear really focused on choice. Android watches give you a wider choice of hardware than the Apple Watch does, and it gives you more choices in the software than the Apple Watch does. So in the past year, Google made 4 software updates, 4 major software updates to Android Wear, and they think that the OS for Android Wear is pretty stable now. So now they're focusing on, rather than just the base operating system, they're focusing on getting more useful apps onto devices, both first-party apps and third-party apps. Some new features that were added to Android Wear just this month were GPS usage, offline music storage, and Wi-Fi usage within the watch itself, and that makes the watch useful even if you don't have an Android phone close by. I'm guessing you'll still want an Android phone to pair with the watch and control it and install apps onto it with, but you can actually be listening to music from the watch, not streaming it from your phone, just stored on the watch. Or you can actually be navigating using a GPS in the watch, not just the one in your phone. So that's nice. You're not just streaming everything like you have to do with the Apple Watch. And Google pointed out that all 7 watches have the latest version of Android Wear. They don't want people to worry about fragmentation. Phones right now in the Android space are still mega fragmented. You know that most phones this time next year will not have gotten the upgrade to Android M yet. A lot of them haven't gotten the upgrade to Android L as of right now. So Google is managing that better with Android Wear. All of the available watches have the latest version of the software. Now that might be because of some push that Google is making to device makers, or it might just be because it's easier to achieve a 100% upgrade rate if you only have 7 models. As like I said, there are so many more Android phones and tablets than there are watches. If there's only 7 of them from like 3 or 4 manufacturers, you can go and bug those 3 or 4 manufacturers until they update the device. So as we see more and more Android watches, we'll have to watch and make sure that that fragmentation does not start to occur. Google says that they want all Android Wear actions, everything you do with the watch, to be glanceable, actionable, and effortless, just like checking the time. So Android Wear watches already include always-on screens, so you don't have to wait for the screen to turn on to check the time. You know, Android watches are supposed to detect when you look at them and get brighter, but even if they mess up and don't detect when you look at them, and I feel like that happens a lot, even though I haven't tried one myself, I would expect it to not always notice when I look at it. So it's good to have an always-on screen so that if I just need to check the time real quick, I don't have to put my wrist up 4 times to get the screen to come on. I can just look at it and see the time. So Google added the functionality to Android Wear in this update that just got announced, where other apps, third-party apps, can now utilize always-on mode. And always-on mode, it allows black and white drawing on the screen, not grayscale drawing, like literally it's either the pixel is off or the pixel is white, and it doesn't use a whole lot of battery life. That's the point of it. So for instance, you can have a map on your screen if you're walking somewhere and you need navigation. That can be always on. So if you just need to glance and see a turn, then, like I said, I expect this is for walking. I don't think you're going to be using that in your car. But if you need to glance at your watch and make sure that you're going in the right direction, you can do that without waiting for it to turn the screen on. Also, to-do lists were another example that they used. If you're using a to-do list app on your watch, then you can glance at the to-do list real quick and the screen will be on all the time, because that way you know it's on when you look at it. So now we know that you don't have to do this over and over to get your device's screen to come on. But the next feature Google announced, called wrist gestures, is basically where you do this over and over. You can flick items off of your wrists onto your wrists. These watches have accelerometers and gyroscopes and things. So basically, you can perform gestures with your arm. Let's say that a notification comes up. You don't have to swipe the notification away. You can just flick it away. Don't see myself doing that. I don't think that's a very natural thing to do. They act like, oh, you're just flicking it away. But yeah, you don't do that with a watch. You don't flick things off of your watch. You flick them off of your watch with your other hand. However, Google did kind of get me, and I kind of understood why they put that feature in when they mentioned those gestures are going to be really awkward to use. However, they're useful if your hands are full. Like if you're holding something in your right hand and you have your watch on your left hand and there's a notification, rather than having to like dismiss the notification with your nose or something, then you can just flick it off the screen. Or, of course, you could set down whatever's in your other hand and then flick it away and pick it back up, but, you know, convenience is nice. Also, another hands-free thing, you can now respond to, oh, that's not hands-free at all. You can now respond to text messages using voice recordings, which you could already do, or by drawing emoji, which is a new thing that they added. So basically what this would be is somebody texts you, you look at the text on your watch, you tap the reply button, you draw a smiley face on your watch, and then the watch presents some smiley face emojis, and you can tap on one and it'll send it back to whoever texted you. So yeah, still not very detailed conversations happening, but I guess it's nice. I think it would be more useful if we could just scroll through some simple emoji rather than having to draw it out. That seems more difficult than choosing it from a list. But yeah, there's also a new launcher for Android Wear. And the new launcher is vertically scrolling and it's alphabetically sorted. And that new launcher, there's a similar new launcher in Android M. It looks a lot like the Android Wear launcher. But yeah, the Android Wear launcher, it scrolls up and down, it's alphabetically sorted, and it's got really big, easy to see buttons. And even though it's kind of clunky, I think it's going to be a whole lot more organized than Apple's hexagon launcher that, if you haven't seen the Apple Watch, which I'm sure you have, the home screen on the Apple Watch is just a ton of bubbles that you scroll around on the screen. It seems really, I don't understand how you would use it, but I haven't gotten the chance to try it out yet. But yeah, the Android Watch home screen, you just scroll through, nice and simple, easier to use, hopefully. I really have to get into like an Apple store and try out the Apple Watch, or a Best Buy and try out an Android Watch or something, because, yeah, I'm talking about all this Android Wear stuff. I have not gotten to try any Android Wear stuff yet. So, like I said earlier, with the hardware being utilized within the watch, code can now run on the watch itself. So before, if you wrote an app for the Android Watch, your app's code would be running on your phone, or on the user's phone, and then the app would like just stream what the display is supposed to look like to the watch. Now you can actually run code on the watch itself. And as of today, there are over 4,000 third-party apps for Android Wear. So yeah, right now I have an Android phone, and I'm planning on upgrading to another Android phone. So even though the Apple Watch looks really nice, if I were to get a smartwatch, I would probably go with an Android Watch just because it matches my phone and it integrates with my phone. I think an iPhone is required for an Apple Watch. So yeah, I would probably go with an Android Watch. Then again, my dumb watch here is working just fine for me. So the next thing that Google talked about was the Internet of Things. I think that this might be the coolest thing that they talked about and the thing with the most real potential to actually go somewhere. Because every company likes to act like every single thing they talk about is the next big thing, and everything they do is going to revolutionize the world. But I think that the Internet of Things, even though it was a pretty small part of their presentation, I think that this is going to be what we really see increase, because we had the whole media frenzy. Oh, Internet of Things is coming up. Everything, the next big thing is the Internet of Things. This was happening a few years ago. And then all of these fragmented Internet of Things devices came out. All of these like light bulbs and thermostats and garage door openers and security systems that all had their own code, their own operating systems running on these proprietary apps. They were not compatible with each other. So then the whole media frenzy died down. We have stopped hearing about the Internet of Things on Fox News every morning. And I think that now that we're not hearing about it every 2 seconds, now is the point where, and Google's starting to pick up, and I'll talk about what they're doing, now the Internet of Things, with your whole smart home, that's going to become a reality. Now that the initial frenzy is over and we're actually starting to organize, we're starting to set standards. Now that people are done designing every device they can possibly think of as fast as they can, we can actually all sit down and talk about the best way to create an actual connected smart house. So like I said, the Internet of Things is theoretically really cool, but practically it's extremely fragmented, just like smartphones were a decade ago. Go back 10 years, you had like Blackberries, like iPhones, maybe when they first came out. There were no apps really, there was no ecosystem there. And then Android was extremely simple when it came out. You had like other operating systems like WebOS. I guess even before smartphones, back when we had like feature phones, basically, think feature phones, where different phones with different proprietary closed operating systems, and Motorola would try and sell you their phone with Motorola OS on it and a couple of built-in Motorola apps, and LG would try and sell you their LG slider phone with LG apps pre-installed on it. It was extremely fragmented, and watches a few years ago, smartwatches were pretty fragmented. You had like the Pebble with its little small ecosystem. There were, I don't even know, really, I wasn't following smartwatches a few years ago because they were extremely fragmented. But yeah, Android did something really cool with the smartphone market, and this is just coming from me. They didn't say this fragmentation bit, but Android came along and said, you know what? Device manufacturers right now don't have a unified platform to build on. So Android was a unified single operating system that all manufacturers could put on their phones and use, and developers could just develop for this one operating system. They wouldn't have to pick and choose between different OEMs. They wouldn't have to make an LG version of their app and a Motorola version of their app and a Samsung version. No, they just have to make one Android version that works everywhere. That was really cool what they did with smartphones, and now Android is a first-class market for mobile apps. And Android is starting to kind of do that with smartwatches. We're not really seeing Pebbles anymore. I know that new Pebble Time just came out, but we're not seeing like smartwatches with proprietary closed code and just selling you the features that are on the watch anymore. We're starting to see smartwatches that run Android Wear. And if there's a feature that Android Wear has, you can use that feature on any watch that you want. So Google is really trying to do the same thing with the Internet of Things. And this is where Google started actually talking, and I'm speaking in their words now. Google is partnering with Nest to standardize the Internet of Things. And if you don't know, Nest makes some home automation things. It makes thermostats that you can control from your phone, and it also makes smoke detectors, which I had not heard of. So Google broke down the standardization into 3 major categories: user experience, the communications platform, and the operating system. So the operating system, they called it Project Brillo, when they first said it, but the operating system is just called Brillo. And Brillo is the Internet of Things operating system. You know, Android is the smartphone operating system. Brillo is the Internet of Things operating system. It's derived from Android, but it's got a whole lot more modest system requirements. It's got a wider architecture compatibility, so it can run on more devices with lower system specs. Basically what it is it's the Android kernel, and it's some very basic libraries. But you don't have a UI on there. What it does is it manages communication, security, and management for apps that use Internet of Things devices. So to communicate with those apps, there's something called Weave, and Weave is a communications platform, they called it, and hopefully it will be standardized between Brillo devices, Android phones, and the cloud or other platforms. So Weave lets devices create functions for other devices to call. For instance, if you're programming a door lock, you can create a lock function, and then your phone can call that lock function, and then the function will be executed on the door lock, and it will lock the door. Very simple concepts, but it's something that we don't have a standardized platform for right now. Google mentioned a brief certification process for Weave devices that will ensure all Weave devices work together. So for your product to use Weave, you can't just stick it on like you could do with Android a while ago, and then we saw really crappy Android devices. No, to use Weave and to advertise that your device uses the Weave platform, you have to submit your device to Google, and Google makes sure that your device is compatible with the Weave platform, that it's compatible with Android devices. And then as far as the user interface goes, any Android device starting with Android M will have built-in support for Weave devices. It looks like there might be a unified settings panel for Weave devices. So maybe you'll open up the settings app on your Android device, and there will be a settings section for Weave devices, and you can go in there and connect to new Weave devices and manage the Weave devices you're connected to. Or maybe there will be a dedicated Weave app, I don't know. That was everything Google said about the Internet of Things, and like I said, it didn't get a whole lot of applause because the Internet of Things is so fragmented right now, but I think if Google does this right, that's probably going to be the most impactful thing that they talked about at their presentation. But next up, Google quickly mentioned machine learning. Apparently, they've been developing something called deep neural networks. And it's the technology that Google uses for image processing, language processing, and they referred back to these deep neural networks when they were talking about some of their later products. For instance, Google Now. Google wants to assist users using Google Now. And assisting users requires understanding context, getting answers proactively, and being able to take action for the user. They say they're doing these things to assist you. Really, they have no desire to assist people except to get people to use their operating system. But they don't make money from their operating system, so really most of Google Now is probably just to gather your data and sell it to somebody. Just keep that in mind when I'm talking about all the shiny new Google Now features, because there are a lot of shiny new Google Now features. So there's a new feature in Android M called Now on Tap, and basically what it is, there's a couple different aspects to it. For one thing, you can now say, "Okay Google," in any app, which means, pause for a second, that means that your microphone is on and listening to you all the time when you're using your phone. Alright, so you can say "Okay Google" in any app, and Google will use the context from the app that you're in to parse pronouns, basically is the big breakthrough in this. So let's say that somebody sends you a text message with the name of a restaurant. You can say, "Okay Google, where is it?" And your phone will automatically recognize that by it, you're talking about the restaurant on your screen. Now for the actual tap section, rather than saying "Okay Google," you can also just tap and hold on the home button of your device, and if you tap and hold on the home button, Google Now will scan your screen and give you in-context cards. For instance, if your friend texts you the name of a restaurant, you can tap and hold on the home button, and a Google Now card with directions to the restaurant will come up. Now, here's the really important thing. These things do not require app developers to make changes to their apps. Google Now scans the app by itself. It scans the text on the screen, because if these things were like, okay, developers can go and implement this, you know developers would not have any reason to want to implement that. But Google has been developing this deep neural network where it's basically artificial intelligence. Your phone can read what's on your screen, and presumably it sends everything on your screen to Google, and then Google sends back the information about what's on your screen, and then your phone picks out what's important from that information. For instance, the name of a restaurant. One thing that's kind of neat, if you say, "Okay, Google," and you start talking to it, Google now can recognize words even if you pronounce them wrong by scanning your screen and matching the unidentified word you said with a similarly spelled word on your screen. I pronounce a lot of things wrong, as the YouTube commenters out there are so fond of telling me. So if I was okay with Google scanning my screen every time I talk to it, then I would think that was a really cool feature. And it looks like there might be these small little G buttons over certain images or other things in Chrome or other apps, and you can tap the G button to get more information. So basically, rather than pressing and holding the home button, some objects might just have buttons you can tap to get Google Now cards about them, or Google information about them. Next up, another thing that Google is using that artificial intelligence technology for is photo management. The problem, too many photos makes it difficult to find and use photos. You know, we take pictures so that we can remember events and go back and re-experience events. But if you have 500 or 1,000 pictures on your phone, it can be difficult to find the one you want. So traditionally, in desktop software, what you would do is you would tag your photos. Even on your phone, you could do that. You would take a picture and you would go and tap on the picture on your phone and add a tag for, let's say I'm at a robotics competition. So I take a picture and then I tag it, robotics competition, and I set the date. Well, I guess it would already have the date, but I still have to tag it manually. The problem is nobody tags their photos manually. When have you ever tagged your photos if you're not a professional photographer? So nobody tags their photos like they're supposed to, but Google wants you to be able to sort your photos by tag without even tagging them. So Google created an app. It's called Google Photos, and it's one place for all your photos. It syncs between all your devices automatically, and it syncs with Google Drive automatically. Now, my phone all the time asks, would you like to set up automatic photo backup to your Google Drive account? And I always click no, because photos that I take, now I don't take risque photos, I don't take photos of anything, you know, objectionable, but it's the principle of the thing. I don't want photos that I take to be sent anywhere if I don't do it myself. I don't want Google to do that automatically. But assuming that you have no problem with that, assuming that you completely trust Google to keep all your information 100% private, then yeah, this is nice. By default, your photos will get sent. If you take a photo on your smartphone, it'll get sent to your Chromebook, it'll get sent to your tablet, it'll get sent to your Google Drive, where you can access it from anywhere. So Google Photos has several sorting methods, extremely similar to the iOS Photos app. You can sort by like event, by person. Here's what's cool though, you don't need to tag those yourself. Google's deep neural network, when you take a photo, it sends the photo into Google, and then Google will scan the photo. It'll recognize the people, places, and objects in the photo. It's all automatic by Google's image recognition, the same image recognition that's used for Google image search. Now, once again, the person giving the presentation said, all of this information is private for my eyes only, but that is extremely unlikely, I just want to point out. Google Photos does make it extremely easy to share photos. It integrates with lots of apps and services. You can easily tweet a photo, share a photo to Facebook, things like that. There's also simple photo editing. You can do color correction. You can make collages if you're into that sort of thing, or you can make slideshows. The most revolutionary thing about Google Photos is, let's say you want to select 20 photos. Right now, you would have to tap and hold on the first one, tap and hold on the second one, tap and hold on the third one, all the way until you get to 20. Now, you can tap and hold on the first one, then drag your finger to the last one, and it will automatically select all of those photos for you. That is going to save so much time. So that's really nice. I hope that comes to other apps such as email, you know? I get a whole lot of spam mail on some of my email accounts, and sometimes I have to tap and hold on 30 different spam emails just to move them all to spam. So if I could just tap and drag that would be really nice for selecting emails or other things on the operating system. But right now it's just in Google Photos. When you share photos, the recipient doesn't actually need to be using Google Photos, so they don't need to be on Android either. Google Photos will actually create a website for your photos hosted by Google Drive, presumably, and it will post your photos there on the website. So then you don't actually need to send people the pictures themselves. It's kind of nice. It saves you bandwidth. They don't have to download all the pictures. You can just send them a link and they can go to the website and view the pictures from there. Automatically optimized, I'm sure, to their device and their connection speed and everything. If the recipient is logged into Google on their device, they can press one button to copy all of the photos from the album to their own Google Drive library. And that's another thing that's kind of creepy, but presumably you would use that if, like, go back to the robotics competition example. I take a bunch of pictures of the robotics competition, I can send an album of those pictures to my robotics friends, and then they can all tap one button to copy all the pictures to their drive so that they always have them. That would be a legitimate use for it. Now, with Google Photos, you get unlimited photo and video storage for free. Now, you are limited to 1080p video and 16 megapixel pictures. And right now, those are both pretty good. But I hope that Google kind of ups those as time goes on and quality of cameras gets better. But yeah, Google Photos is already on the Play Store, so download it and give your photos to Google today. Next up, Google talked about Android One. I'm not a huge fan of this whole section of the presentation, but I'll talk about some of the points they made. So the biggest thing I learned was Android One actually still exists. I thought it kind of died out, but nope, it's still a thing in several third world countries. Basically, the message I get when like Apple talks about we really want to focus on this new emerging markets, or when Google talks about, yeah, we really want to get customers in where we want to help people. It's never customers. We want to help people in emerging markets. What that is to me is we're out of customers here. We're out of customers in the United States and in Britain and Europe, the places where people actually use the internet. We're out of customers. So now we need to go looking for more customers elsewhere, which would be the third world countries that are unfortunately behind in technology. So there's a new optimized search page for third world countries, and also there's new page compression features for non-Google pages. So if you're in a third world country, then when you search Google and you click on a Google search result, those web pages will actually be compressed by Google's servers, sent to your device and displayed. And Opera Mini already does that, so if you want to use that to save on your data limit, then you can use that in Opera Mini. Opera's servers will compress websites and send them to your device. But Google just has that built into Chrome now. Another thing, the YouTube app can now download videos and save them for up to 48 hours to watch offline. And then after 48 hours goes by, if you haven't watched it yet, I guess it just deletes them, because they said 48 hours. I do want to mention the Dailymotion app already has that feature for everyone. Both of those features are things that there are alternatives you can use in this country and anywhere in the world. But Google just made those features built into its own products, and it's only enabled in those countries. You cannot go and use those features if you're in the United States, or if you're in Britain or Canada or wherever else. Now, those two features, like I said, there are already other things that you can get those features through in the United States and elsewhere in the world, anywhere in the world. You can use those features already. Google just built them into the products now, but you can't actually use them. You can't use Google's version of them unless you're in those countries. Google has geo-locked those features to the countries that they're designed for, those third world countries. Interesting decision. Google Maps now has more businesses and transit systems mapped in third world countries, and Google Maps also works offline. Now, Google Maps working offline is interesting. You can already use Google Maps offline if you preload a route, then you can disconnect from the internet and view the route, but you don't actually need to preload routes with this. From what they showed in their presentation, it seems like the entire city's map data is essentially preloaded automatically, which I would think that's not good for device performance, but I'm not sure how it works. Maybe it's mostly text and it doesn't use a lot of resources. So you can actually search for businesses within the area that you're in, and you can read reviews for businesses and get turn-by-turn directions to the business offline without connecting to the internet. The biggest thing is getting reviews. Like, really? You're going to download reviews for every business around me just in case I lose internet connection? I'm sure that it works better than I'm making it out to be, but I have no idea how it would work because they didn't really explain. So yeah, Android One, still around. New development tools for you developers out there. Now, last year, Google launched Android Studio, and Android Studio is a unified IDE for building Android apps. And so a few years ago, if you wanted to get into Android apps, if you wanted to build an Android app, you had to download Eclipse or NetBeans or some third-party IDE and set it up for Android programming yourself, for Java programming. Well, Google made Android Studio for app programming, and I've actually used it, and it works pretty well. It's got built-in device emulation is probably the biggest thing. Biggest thing for me that was what I noticed. Because a while ago, I tried to get into Android programming using Eclipse, and the device emulation was probably the most difficult part to set up in Eclipse. But yeah, Android Studio, it's all just built in. So yeah, Android Studio, because most Android apps are built in Java, Android Studio in the past has been a Java IDE. Well, apparently apps that want a little more horsepower can actually use C and C++ code. I wasn't aware that Android did that, but it does. So Android Studio now has support for C and C++ in addition to Java. Google mentioned that Polymer, a library for web app user interfaces, is now at version 1.0, so that's nothing new, but it's stable. If you're into web apps, go and check out Polymer. Google Analytics, Google Maps, and other libraries are now available on CocoaPods, where they can be imported into iOS apps. So I've been talking about some of the new libraries Google is giving Android developers. iOS developers can use those too. And I think that it's kind of nice that, you know, Google is extending their reach into every aspect of our lives, but at least they're not locking us into Android devices. We can give all of our data to Google from iOS devices too. And then Google also mentioned their product Firebase, and I think they talked about that last year, something similar. Basically, that lets developers write the front end of an app, and then they can write just the front end, and Google will take care of the back end. Google's automated servers will be the back end for your app. The alternative to that would be using the Google Cloud Platform if you want to develop your own back-end application to work with your Android app. Google says that they want to help developers engage users, so there's new app indexing tools that allow apps to appear in Google search results. So if a user does a Google search, then I thought they already had this, but if a user does a Google search on their Android device, then Android apps will be included in the Google search. Cloud messaging lets developers send messages to users' devices through their apps, or it lets, you know, the developers aren't personally going to be sending them, but it's a push notification system for Android apps. It now works on iOS in addition to Android and Chrome, so that's not new for Android, but once again, you can use Google's backend for your iOS apps now for push notifications. Users can now subscribe to individual topic streams using that cloud messaging technology. Basically, they can choose to only get certain notifications from an app. So let's say that Jupiter Broadcasting has an Android app, and Jupiter Broadcasting is a group that makes like 10 different podcasts, but let's say I only care about one of those podcasts. I can subscribe to only receive notifications about the Linux Action Show podcast and not receive notifications about any of the other podcasts. Websites can now be easily added to the home screen from Chrome. iOS has had that since version 1. Way to play catch up, Google. New analytics for developers are available, and developers can view where their users are hearing about their apps, so developers can see if users are hearing about their apps from other apps or from websites, from what websites they're coming from. Presumably that uses the user's web history before they get the app. Here's something interesting. There's a new thing called experiments where developers can have several versions of their Play Store listings. So when you make an app on the Play Store, you have a page on the Play Store for your app, and you can basically develop multiple versions of that page, and Google will automatically randomly give users, maybe not randomly, but automatically give different users different versions of your page, and then you can see which versions of your page attract more downloads. And then there's a new thing called developer pages, And that's sort of interesting. I've always, when I went to download an app, download a specific app, I really don't care about the developer. I'm sorry, but I don't care about the developer. I just care about whatever I'm using the app for. You know, if I'm downloading a game, I just care about the game. I'm not following the developer. But Google wants users to care about developers more. So developers can now create profiles, developer pages on Google Play where you can go and see what a developer's apps are all about, and you can see a list of all of the apps from the same developer. So now that it's easier to do that, now that there's going to be a developer page where I can actually go and look at the other apps by certain developers, now I might start caring about developers more, which is a good thing for developers. And some new monetization things. Google Analytics are now more integrated with AdMob, and developers can now choose to show certain ads to users with certain usage patterns. So if you have a game with ads in it, if a user is beating every single level really quickly, then you can choose to not show as many ads, not get in their way as much. Whereas if a user is having some trouble with your game, if they're repeating the same level over and over again, then maybe you can pop up an ad for an in-app purchase that can skip the level or something. Next, Google talked about Google Play. Search results in Google Play are now grouped into categories. So it's like category view in Google Play, only for your search results. There's a new family star, and that's an icon in Google Play that marks family-friendly content. So any family-friendly content will have this star. There are also different icons for different age groups in Google Play, so you can tell what apps are appropriate and what content is appropriate for different age groups for people who have kids. Now, of course, that's Google standards for what's appropriate. So yeah, it's not going to just solve parenting, but yeah, there's a family filter included in the Play Store that you can turn on your kids' devices. And if an app is ad supported, or if an app is supported by in-app purchases, that is now clearly labeled. They said it's clearly labeled for parents, so a parent can see if their kid is using apps that display third-party ads that they might not be comfortable with, or if an app has in-app purchases that their kids might accidentally or purposefully purchase. I think it would be nice to let everyone see how an app is supported. If it's got ads in it, tell me if it has ads in it before I download it. Tell me if it has in-app purchases before I download it. That would be a cool thing to roll out to everyone. And then for developers, once again, their organization was all over the place. They went back to developers for 2 seconds and mentioned that there's now an Android Nano degree, and it's a 6-month $1,200 course in Android development. So you pay $1,200, you get this course in Android app development through Udacity, and the course has been designed by Google in partnership with Udacity, so it's a Google endorsed Nano degree. It's a certification for app developers. Here's what I think is the second coolest thing that they talked about: Google Cardboard, which is Google's project to bring virtual reality to the masses. So the Oculus Rift is out there, the Microsoft HoloLens is going to be out there soon, but those are expensive headsets, and they're like really complicated headsets. So last year at Google I/O, Google passed out these pieces of cardboard, and you fold the cardboard up into a viewer, a Google Cardboard viewer. You put your Android phone into the cardboard box and you hold it up to your head, and then your phone acts as the computing for it, and the cardboard is just the exoskeleton, and then you've got a virtual reality headset that you can look through. So Google announced that there are over 1 million cardboards in the world right now. However, it's still just a novelty. There's not much you can do with it as of now. They're trying to change that. They've made some updates to the Google Cardboard template. For one thing, phones have gotten bigger since the original Cardboard viewer was released. So the new Cardboard viewer supports up to 6-inch phones. The original Google Cardboard viewer had a magnet button that was really cool. Rather than like a click button, it was a slider button in the cardboard, and it was neat, but it only worked with certain phones. It worked with like the Nexuses, maybe a couple non-Nexus phones. There's a new cardboard button, and literally it's no longer metal, it's just a cardboard button, and it now works with every phone. I'm not sure how they would design a button that works with every phone for sure, but they said it did. And the old cardboard took 12 steps to assemble. You had to make 12 folds to put it together. The new viewer only takes 3 folds, or 3 steps. The Cardboard SDK now supports, once again, Android and iOS. So you can create Google Cardboard apps that run on iPhones now, in addition to Android devices. Once again, that's really cool. They're making their products, or they're keeping their products available across all platforms. Even though they could just lock it into Android, they're keeping them available on all platforms. Google did a quick presentation about something called Google Cardboard Expeditions. And expeditions are designed for education. They let teachers use Google Cardboard to take the class on virtual field trips. So virtual reality, you know, is what the cardboard's all about. So in schools, kids can use these cardboards and cheap phones in them, and they can hold them up and they can be transported to both tourist attractions or places that even people can't go, like under the ocean or in outer space. And then there's a new thing called Jump, and Jump allows content creators to capture the world in virtual reality video. Viewers can be immersed in a virtual reality experience, so you bring a Jump camera to your event, set it up, and then other people can later hold up their Google Cardboard and feel like they're actually there. Like, it's not just looking at pictures, it's 360-degree pictures is what it is. Now, this is better than panoramic pictures. It can capture video. Google specially designed the camera geometry for it. Basically, you take 16 cameras, put them in a circle pointing outward. And the cameras don't have to be fancy. They can just be off-the-shelf cameras. And when you put them in that circle, they obviously capture a 360-degree view, but they actually capture more than 360 degrees because there's overlap between different cameras, which we'll get to the overlap and why it's important in a minute. Now, Google is actually partnering with GoPro to build a official Jump-ready camera. However, the specs for the Jump camera are open, so any manufacturer can create one of these. So the next aspect of it is the assembler, and the Jump assembler uses the overlapping video footage to create images from thousands of different viewpoints along the camera array. So like I said, it's similar to a panoramic image, but it uses a whole lot of algorithms to make images match better. It creates an immersive experience. It uses the images to animate stereoscopic video as people look around and walk around. So this assembler, it matches the colors, it matches the lighting, it uses that overlap to make sure that there's no glitches in between sections of the picture. And so you can take a video, and this assembler patches it all together, and then people can use Google Cardboard to be in the video, to view the video. They can look around, and in real time, well, maybe partially in real time, the assembler will be patching together the different video feeds from the different cameras, and it's going to look like you're actually there. It's going to look like you're standing where the camera was standing when it was recording. And here's something interesting. The Jump player, obviously, you need a specialized player to play virtual reality footage, right? Wrong. Google will be using YouTube to play Jump virtual reality footage. Right. So on your computer, you can go to YouTube and watch 360-degree video with a really big rectangle, or you can have Google Cardboard. You can put your Android or iOS device into Google Cardboard, hold it up to your face, and then the YouTube app will actually be used for delivering that video that somebody took. So like I said, I thought that the coolest thing they talked about was the Internet of Things. I would love to see people living in houses where they can control their lights, they can control their door locks, they can control everything from their devices. That's placing a whole lot of trust in your device, but I think that that is really cool, and it's going to change the way people live. And then the second coolest thing I think Google talked about was that whole Google Cardboard thing. They have really been, I thought it was just a one-off thing last year. I didn't realize they've been developing it, but they have been. They've got teams working on virtual reality, virtual experience, and I am really excited about the Microsoft HoloLens. I think that Microsoft actually has something cool that they're doing with the HoloLens, but this Google Cardboard is a lot more open, and so I'm really excited to see all these specs being created. And yeah, we'll see where we go with virtual reality. A few more things that Google mentioned toward the end of the presentation. Google's doing the whole self-driving car thing. Almost 100 people die from human-caused collisions every day. And this is something I think is also really important. They didn't talk a whole lot about it, and that's why it's not on my top list of things that they talked about, because they didn't actually talk about their self-driving car a whole lot at this keynote, but they have been developing, Google has been doing a whole lot of research and development with their self-driving cars. Machine learning, like I said, that whole deep neural network, it's helping cars drive themselves. Self-driving cars are now being tested on real roads in California. So recently, Google has stopped driving those self-driving cars in parking lots. They are now actually being driven on the road. And I think that if the government doesn't screw it up, which they probably will, government's probably going to try and stop the whole self-driving car thing. I think once we get past whatever dumb thing the government's going to do, self-driving cars are going to be really important. Because 100 people a day dying from car crashes. If we can build self-driving cars that actually don't crash, or crash less often than humans at least, it would be really convenient to not have to learn how to drive. People wouldn't have to learn how to drive anymore. People wouldn't have to worry about getting driver's licenses. You'd be able to do things. You'd be able to read or watch news or whatever while your car is driving you to your location. So I really am excited to see the whole self-driving car thing come to fruition in the coming decades. It's going to take a while, but I really, really hope that we see those on the road within my lifetime, because that is going to be a big safety improvement and convenience improvement, self-driving cars. So keep an eye on that. And then the last thing we talked about, if you've heard about Project Loon, Google is using hot air balloons. They stay in the air for over 100 days, and I heard that Google was releasing balloons in random places. I didn't know why, so now I know why. Project Loon uses balloons to bring cell coverage to remote areas. They're basically floating cell towers, or more accurately, floating signal extenders. So they release all these balloons over third world countries, right? And then a cell phone tower that's 100 miles away will send a signal to one balloon and the next balloon and the next balloon until it gets to a user in a third world country who will receive the signal on the device, and they might send a text message. That text message will get sent to a balloon and another balloon, and then back to the cell tower. So rather than building more cell towers, Google is putting balloons in the air. Eventually they're going to fall. Like I said, 100 plus days, that's like a third of a year. So yeah, that's really more of a research thing than actual practicality, it seems like. But that's what they're doing with balloons, because I had heard about that. Like I said, I didn't know what it was. So now we know. So this was a nice hour-and-a-half long video. I hope I didn't bore you, but this was shorter. You know what? This was 30 minutes shorter than the actual Google keynote. And you got my personal insights into everything too. So that's why it's a good thing that you watched this video rather than, or in addition to, the actual Google keynote, which was 2 hours. If you want to discuss anything I talked about, of course that comment section is below on YouTube or Dailymotion, because all my videos do go on Dailymotion as well. But I would really like it if you visited nerdofthestreet.com. We've got forums there, and you can talk about all this stuff with us there, and I will respond. Additionally, if you have anything you think I should make a video about, any hot technology topics out there that you think I don't know about, or you think that I should be telling people about, leave them in the comments below. Like I said, I always love video ideas. So yeah, that is everything Google talked about this year, and I will be back shortly with Apple's news. But for now, I'm Jacob Kaufman, I'm Nerd of the Street, and I will see you guys later. Bye.